So our next speakers are going to be Darryl, Meekins, and Jim Hardy from Lightbox. Thank you so much for being here. And they are going to dive into what it looks like to implement AI on a global scale. They will share how they built a machine learning program in Africa using AI-driven approaches. This is going to be a powerful example of scale and impact. I am very excited to hear about how you've done this, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you're ready to go, we are ready to go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kenna. Well, just as we get started, just a big shout out, thank you to Kenna and Callista and all the other people at LAPU who've been putting this together for a long time now. And I am so impressed with how seamless all of this is. And that's just testament to the fact that there is a lot of thought that's gone into making sure that this works, because I think we all know enough about technology and conferences and all the things to know that it doesn't just happen. So big shout out to you guys. We really appreciate giving us this opportunity. And welcome to everybody who is here today. My name is Darryl. I'm the CEO at Lightbox Consultants, which we'll talk about in a few moments. I'm joined by the magnificent and mercurial Jim Hardy, who is my colleague and friend, who will be sharing a little bit later today some of the technicalities that we work through in this program. And we're delighted to be sharing with you a little bit about how we have integrated and thought through AI solutions in the work that we do. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of where we're headed with this session, I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about who we are. And the reason for that is not to give you a shameless plug. Well, it's maybe 5% a bit of a shameless plug, but most of it is about giving you a little bit of context as to how we try to come at solutioneering for complex problems. And regardless of whether we're talking about an ID solution or we're talking about a leadership issue or any of those kinds of things, and of course AI as well, we like to think of these situations and problems or opportunities as ways for us to operationalize a framework that we have. So I want to share with you a little bit of what that framework means, because when we talk about the specific use case in a few moments, it becomes a little bit more, hopefully, illuminating for you. So let me start by sharing a little bit about our story and who we are. So if you want to go ahead and click on that QR code, that'll give you all of the access that you'd want to our website, and you can find out all the ins and outs of who we are and what we do. But my friend Graham and I started Lightbox about 4 years ago, and the reason for that is we didn't just want to become another learning agency, vendor, provider, company. We wanted to be a place where we could help organizations of all kinds, all stripes, figure out how best they can imbibe and value innovation and creativity in the learning space to make impact. And I know that sounds a lot like a lot of corporate jargon, and it certainly can be, but our goal was to try to democratize learning across all the different ways in which that might be found. So that could be schools, K through 12, it could be colleges and universities, obviously, but also small and medium businesses and enterprises and nonprofit organizations and L&D teams and all of these things. And to that end, we brought together a group of ninjas, of design experts that are part of our team, and Jim is one of those ninjas who's joined us today, who are multi-talented, who are omnicompetent in a number of different arenas, to really bring their skills, their experience to helping build those systems for the people that we work with and serve. And like I mentioned, a big part of that is really leveraging what technology gives us as an affordance today. And of course, we'll be talking about AI and technology integration to learning experiences. But sometimes it's not about technology. Sometimes we have found that people become so enamored with missing out, a lot of FOMO if we don't adopt this tool, we're not using chat as integrated in our systems, then we're just like missing the boat completely. And people actually forget who it is they actually are, who it is they're trying to serve, and what they're all about. So we don't come with custom or prefabricated solutions, but rather customize that to the people that we are working with. So I say all that to say, again, a little bit 5% shameless plug, but hopefully also gives you an idea of some of the context that we work within. And I'll mention more specifically what that looks like in a few moments. But please feel free to go ahead and check us out. We'd certainly appreciate that. We'd love to have conversations with any of you who are watching this and you feel like it'll be great to just kind of hear a little bit more. You can go on our website and submit an info email to us. We'll get right back to you and schedule a call where we can just hear what is the problem you're trying to solve, what is the issue that you're wondering about. We love to nerd out on learning problems and things that people are hearing and seeing. So if that's you, you're in good company, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. So please feel free to do that. We'd love to hear from you. So getting to our particular use case. So as Jim will share in a few moments, when we get into the nitty-gritty of the solutioneering aspect, what we love to do when we start to engage with complex problems, and in this particular case, the complex problem involved different continents, different languages, people who have perhaps not had such familiarity with online learning and yet were constrained within the particular LMS environment. All of those things kind of coming together, which allowed us to sit down with leadership and say, okay, so how are we going to tackle these issues with the tools that we have? And so this little 6-step process, which I'm not going to spend time unpacking all the different elements that go into the 6-stage process. Some of it is pretty intuitive and perhaps things that people do already in your own environment. But we like to start as we think about what kind of framework is going to work best and align to the solution or to the issue that's trying to be solved. Is we look at functionality, and what we'll share with you a little bit later in this presentation is every learning system that we have, an LXP or an LMS or just using websites, whatever it might be, they all have pros and cons. They all have upsides and downsides. There's things they do well and things they don't. And whatever that might be, you've already made a choice in making that selection as to what kind of wireframes are going to be the best way for you to get out your content. So we, again, out of the resistance of wanting to just kind of move into what's new, shiny, sexy, that people just say, well, you've got to be using this new tool that was just released last week, and of course we know 2 weeks time there's going to be another tool that's going to solve all of the problems that the other tool had and all of these things. And I think I heard in one of the previous sessions that, a year from now, we'll probably be having different conversations about AI. And it's definitely true that we're going to have to all continue to be learners. But within that space, we've also got to say, what actually is going to give us legs? What can we imbibe and enculturate into our system that we feel is going to have some longevity to it? It's not going to be outdated, completely ineffective in a few weeks. So that functionality piece is key. Then we think about what's reliable. What do we know is going to work over time, has some proof behind it, has some POC behind it. What is usable, that people don't have a huge stair step in trying to figure it out, and they have to download something, or they have to have 3 or 4 authentications before they can use the tool and things like that. And that goes along with convenience. And number 5 is the one that people often get stuck on, pleasurable. And we like to often talk to people about how we like to build learning adventures. We don't necessarily talk about courses or programs, although that's the language that we use in academia. But we talk about learning adventures, and they should be somewhat enjoyable, pleasurable, fun even, right? And so that's what we try to talk about with people is can we use and create integrations with tools that are going to make the learning experience more enhanced. And the more enhanced it is, the more memorable it is, the more memorable it is, the more pleasurable it is. And people actually remember the things that you're trying to teach them. So in our particular case, we were thinking about how do we leverage AI for learner success in Africa? So here's the particular case we were trying to solve for. CMU Africa, Carnegie Mellon University, is a university that is well known. You probably know already that it is significant in the space of computer science, engineering, and also AI before it was popular. So the CMU was one of those schools that had investment in robotic technology and things like that for many years, dating back decades into thinking through about automations and things like that. So they've always been on that bleeding edge of what educative tech might look like in this space. And so as we came on board to help them think through how can they build a machine learning program that was helping students think about AI and machine learning within the sort of next iteration of the space that we're in, but in a way that was able to be scaled, multilingual, and also something that was particularly pertinent to the African use case culture, and along with the fact, along with the fact that it was also going to be built within Canvas. So some of you might be saying, well, yeah, I really love Canvas. Others of you might be saying, oh boy. Okay, and again, every LMS, pros and cons. But those were some of the things we were dealing with, and Jim's going to get into that in a few moments. So the question we're trying to solve for is, how do you solve complex design problems within a constrained environment such as this? And one of the things that we looked at fairly early on was we realized that we needed to create a space for learners in this program to be able to ask questions without having instructors having to answer those questions. There simply weren't enough instructors around who either understood the content or frankly were just available to be able to deal with the scale and the volume of learners and languages. And so the question became, well, how do we create something that will work for them? And so I'm just going to quickly share with you that one of the solutions that we created in this space that worked here, and it's nothing new. You probably have heard this all day and maybe have heard about this already for some time. So agentic AI is not something that's going to be new to a lot of people here. But I'm just sharing how we particularly used the advantage of agentic AI to embed what became known as Ask Scotty within each page of the courses within this Canvas environment that students lived in. The reason why it was called Scotty is because that's the mascot of the school. And Scotty is known everywhere on the CMU campus. And so it was a familiar icon. It was a familiar mascot for everybody. And we felt that it was an appropriate tool, appropriate image rather, to say to people, yeah, if you've got questions, ask Scotty. And so that helped students with not only course questions, but ideation on assessments, pre-assessment preparation, and other sorts of checks that were going through there. So I'm going to pause here now. You're done listening to me. I'm going to hand over to Jim, who's going to guide you through some of the other complex problems we try to solve with technology in this course. So over to you, Jim.
Might help if I unmute my mic. Thanks, Darryl. So I'm going to walk you through how we went about solving some of the big difficulties in this particular project. I'm Jim Hardy, and I led the learning design team on this project. So I want to start with what we were trying to do from a learning design standpoint. We're building a course in Africa about AI. Well, the course is in Africa. All of the people building it are not. I've never been to Africa. I don't know the African cultures. I don't know the languages, but we want to build all of that into the team, into the courses. So here's what the ask was coming to us. One is we wanted authentic assessment. So rather than just having a quiz about coding, students needed to be able to actually go in and do coding. And remember, this is within a MOOC style environment, so we don't have instructors who can be giving individualized feedback. We don't have them able to grade assignments. So that's another ask. No touch grading. The grading all has to be done automatically. And it has to include no extra cost to either the client or the student. So either use their existing tech stack or use freely available add-ons to the tech stack. And all of these have to be accessible by students without going into more subscriptions or any out-of-pocket costs. And it all has to seamlessly integrate back to Canvas, which has its own issues. It's great in a lot of ways, but there are some things that just don't connect well to it. It needs to be not have a lot of extensive setup. So we don't want students to be, spending hours and hours just getting set up to begin learning. That's a recipe for not starting. And it has to be usable on the widest possible range of hardware. Africa is a different environment than designing for, say, Los Angeles or New York City. You can't count on every student having a computer. Most of them have a cell phone. So everything that can be done or that needs to be done by the student has to be able to be done on fairly minimal hardware. Students who do these assignments, who have the assignments graded, need to have feedback so that when they make mistakes, they can get feedback on what to do wrong. Again, though, without instructor touch. And this has to be scalable to a large number of students. The goal here is for this to be run like a MOOC and to have students from all over Africa all coming to CMU Africa to take this course and learn how to build AI. So that's the ask. How did we respond? Well, our approach was to begin by leveraging internal tech expertise. One of the wonderful things about Lightbox is that we have a very varied group of people that we work with. So we have people who are used to doing kind of normal hands-on learning design for small classes. We have people who have worked building engineering programs or engineering courses for major tech organizations. We have people who've worked within computer development as well as people who haven't. So we have a wide range, and we assembled a team that brought in expertise from across that so that we had internal expertise on all of these aspects. And then we began to research, how do we put together a tech stack that can accomplish all of the things in our ask? And the key here is to not just research for the answer you're looking for, but to research for the question. And so we're looking at a broader range of things, even when we know they won't work. Because by researching broadly, we learn more about the questions, we learn what other people have done that didn't work, so that we can avoid learning that the hard way and instead focus on the solution that we ultimately come up with. Another key feature is to map the process. Don't just say, well, I know what solution I want, and so I'm just going to look at how I get that solution. Think about the process that that a student and the instructors and the institution has to go through in order to implement any possible solution. At some point, the student is going to have to bring up a coding piece. At some point, they're going to have to submit. At some point, that's going to have to be graded. Map that process out. What are the essential elements? From that, you begin to develop ideas about what the tech stack looks like. And the key here is, as you begin to do this, make a mock-up of what it would look like with the solution you're envisioning, test it, and then revise. And usually the first set of solutions you come up with don't fully integrate, so you have to go back and revise it. Once you have one that works, that you're kind of happy with, document it, because ultimately it's not me or my team that's going to be using this. It's the team at CMU Africa, it's the students. And so we have to document every single step so that when we hand the tech stack over and say, here's CMU Africa, here's the tech stack you can use to accomplish your goals, we're also giving them the instructions on how to do it. And finally, develop training so that not only can you say, oh, read the documentation we gave you, but we can walk them through it, because a lot of times that's just the easier way to get to the final result. Go ahead, Darryl. So there were some sticking points along the way after the research part. One of them is that a lot of the free applications that we had, they don't go together well. They're non-standard environments. For example, Google Colab was the coding environment that CMU Africa preferred, and it ended up being what we used. But it isn't just a regular Python coding platform. It actually uses Jupyter notebooks, which are related to Python. But even then, it doesn't use the standard version. It uses non-standard version. So we had to design around that. Since we're assembling a tech stack out of multiple pieces that weren't always designed to go together, they don't go together. They're not made to. And so we have to design the glue and the pathways that make them work together. And then back to training the client. There are specific ways, not just of using this stack, but it had the client who's writing the actual labs to be done, because the professors have to write what the labs are. That's not something that's within our expertise. So the professors have to write the labs in a certain way so that they can work through this, and communicating all of that was important. And finally, once we have a working solution, figuring out ways to hone it, polish it, smooth it out so that it's seamless for students. Okay. So here's the solution that we came up with. First, we're using Google Colab. That's what it looks like. It can be used from any browser, generates Jupyter notebooks, which, while not standard fully in the Python world, are standard enough that anything that students can do in them is transferable. Next. We used Otter Grader, which is developed by UC Berkeley. It works behind the scenes. Students actually never see it, but it was essential to get Google Colab to talk to the other elements that we use to get the automatic grading set up. But that meant that we had to train CMU on how to use it. Go ahead, Darryl. That then hooks into Gradescope, which is an add-on to Canvas. It's a separate program, but that you can add on. That fortunately, it turned out CMU Africa already had. And so even though it did have a cost, it was a cost they were already paying, so no added cost. And then finally, that hooks into the LMS, into Canvas. Now, all of this works once you get it glued together fairly seamlessly. There is one sticking point we weren't able to fully resolve, and that is that while there's no instructor touch in the grading itself, there is an instructor touch in the recording of the grades. So Gradescope, along with AutoGrader, will hand back a grade on the assignment, along with feedback about what went wrong or if something did. But it doesn't actually record the grade in Canvas itself. And we can't get around that because Gradescope and Canvas intentionally set the block there to prevent things going awry. But we went through with CMU Africa on how to get around that, either by using a TA to simply click the button that says to record it, or even by using a cron job to go in and periodically just record the grades. And here's what the whole thing looks like. Starts out in Canvas, pops the student into Google Colab. They just click on a link and it will open this up with their lab ready to do. They work through the lab, and when they submit it, it submits into Gradescope just by a file upload. It uploads, they get the feedback that it was uploaded successfully. A lot of magic happens in the background with AutoGrader and Gradescope, and then you have the grade posted. So that's what it looks like. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim, for sharing that. So some of you might be wondering, okay, so did this work? What actually did it look like? It's one thing to design it, another thing to actually do it. And that's a great question. And it's one that I actually went back and spoke to the folks there at CMU just about a week or so ago and said, hey, tell me how it's working, what's not working. We're about to get this presentation, and if it's going really well, we'll make sure we talk about it. If it's not going well at all, we won't say anything. Just kidding. But yeah, we wanted to hear how it's working. And it's been really interesting to get some of that feedback. So certainly going back to the beginning, I asked them about how is Ask Scotty working for people. And it's like, yeah, students are so used to now using chat or other kinds of tools as part of their cadence. It was convenient for them to be able to access something that was right in the course, and then it was ring fenced and trained and everything else. But it just gave them that sort of one less extra step that they had to go through to kind of get the answers they were looking for in the first place. And then, of course, probably more importantly is how did all these tech stack apparatus pieces actually work, and that were they clunky, did things break, and all those kinds of things. And I'm very happy to report that as of now, nothing's broken. And part of that is related to the tools, but part of it's also related to the what Jim was alluding to or mentioned in terms of training. Because we created for each one of these steps that we just very briefly walk through with you now, a detailed SOP that kind of went step by step. This is what this looks like. This is how you fix it. These are the links, all those kind of things, as part of the handoff package, so that anybody, even someone with a rudimentary familiarity with each of these tools, could just follow that step by step process and figure it out. And because there were Google Docs and things like that, very easy to translate into different languages that they'd be thinking through, which primarily were French and Swahili. And they were able to get both of those languages in there and translate those. And what you didn't see, of course, was the rest of the course, which, we didn't really apply to this particular topic. But there were step-by-step videos and things that we custom created using avatars, using voice cloning. So making use of technology in that sense as well, that allowed for learners to be able to hear the content in language that they could understand, or as well as being able to hear in accents and things like that were familiar to them, as opposed to something they might watch on YouTube or something else like that. So all in all, we felt like this process allowed us to bring in, again, using our principles and practices, to think about what is most going to be usable, and it's going to be memorable and durable for learners and administration, and bring in the necessary AI and automation tools to help make that happen. So that's a case study we're happy to share with you today, and feel like it had some legs to it. Hopefully it gives you some food for thought as well. And again, just as we end up here, as we're getting close to our time, just that little QR code again. If you have any more questions about this, or maybe you say, look, that was a lot in a short space of time, we'd love to kind of unpack that a little bit more with you. Please go on our website, check us out, send me a note, send me an email. We'd love to have a conversation with you. So thank you. With that, we'll hand back to Kenna and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much for sharing that case study, Darryl and Jim. That was very interesting. Does anybody have questions for them? Sometimes the questions take a minute to pop up, but I don't see anything in the chat yet. I can ask one. I know that this was just one case study, but do you have any other similar things that you're excited that Lightbox has tried or implemented, or that have worked well in other situations?
Yeah, so I mentioned it very briefly at the end there, but we have found that avatar and cloning technology and voice cloning in particular has really been helpful in speeding up the process of creating whether it be faculty videos or just general content in general for courses. And of course, leveraging the increasing plethora of tools that are out there, whether it's like InVideo or some other tools that are out there that can create video very quickly. One of the reasons for that is we're noticing that it should be no surprise to anyone, but more and more people are expecting to view videos that are brief, that are catchy, that have a lot going on in them, but are also very informative. It's almost that everybody wants everything on like 1.5 speed, just like a TikTok video. And so we're noticing that that's even true with lectures and things like that. So having faculty members or content experts, SMEs go in and record those kinds of things is tricky. But having avatars and clones and things like that just make it seamless, and updating them is a matter of seconds and minutes, as opposed to getting back into a studio or getting back on your computer and re-recording something. So I'm noticing that's something that people more and more are looking for as well, in addition to the agentic piece, of course.
Absolutely. Those are some incredible things that you're trying. Jim, do you have anything that you want to add to that? It seems like you're more on the technical side of some of those things. So any thoughts there?
I am. AI was, in the background with our process. AI was incredibly helpful. I used it personally a lot in building the storyboards, scripts for videos, and trying to get, because a lot of the content we were building for is highly, highly technical, mathematical content. Fortunately, again, we had a team member who could kind of parse through it, but parsing through it is not the same as building a great video. And so working with AI to both distill out that content and then present it in a way that is accessible, that was a great time saver.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It looks like we had a question come in. Matthew was asking, were there any difficulties the students may have had initially or continue to have as of now?
Yeah, great question. And that's one of the questions I wanted to get to the bottom of as well, because we definitely didn't want to come to this session saying, here's a great solution, or just don't try it because it doesn't work. But no, absolutely. As with anything, there's always some folks who struggle, and there's some who never have any issues. So when you look at the macro, what I anticipated there being was a lot of clunkiness with people not actually knowing, when am I supposed to upload this, and how does that work, and did I upload the right file, and just some of those like practical things. But I'm happy to report there's been almost no incidents of that across 4 different cohorts that have now gone through this program, at least none that are statistically relevant. And I think a lot of that is actually down to not only the tool stack, which just, once it's there, it kind of works, but I think it's also honestly down to good old-fashioned documentation, as Jim was mentioning. Just document everything, make it crystal clear, step by step. Don't assume anything. And those SOPs are, if you're a really detail-oriented person, you're going to love things like that. If you're like me and you're just kind of like, well, just give me the big picture, they can be very frustrating, but they're absolutely necessary. And it feels kind of old school to say, like, oh, just write everything down, or have AI create an SOP for you, whatever. But it's really been helpful. So yeah.
That's great. Jim, did you have anything to add to that, or do either of you have any final thoughts or words? I know we're coming up on time here.
Nothing to add to that.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Darryl, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say thanks again for giving us the opportunity. And again, would love to have the conversation with anybody that has more questions about this. Just please hit us up. We'd love to have a chat. But thanks to LAPU and to you and others for making this happen.
Oh, yeah. And, we couldn't make it happen without great speakers like you. So thank you both for sharing your case study and just everything that you've learned throughout implementing that. We appreciate